Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 85. And remember, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, Tommy, you can also go over to YouTube and see our beautiful faces in full Technicolor. But if you're driving, Tommy, then, make sure you stick to listen to the audio version. Clearly. Now, you can, of course, head over to you should head over to camerashakepodcast.com and join our Camera Shake community, because that is where we will let you know about new things, stuff that's coming up and all that kind of stuff, because we've got something coming up, actually.
We do, but should we just wait for just a couple of seconds while they go do that?
Exactly. Remember, camerashakepodcast.com.
All right, let's leave into it.
Head over there. Camera.
You done it yet?
With a C, shake, camerashakepodcast.com. You'll see a button that says join the community. Hit that. Join our community.
Yes. Is that enough time? That's enough time.
Life will be beautiful henceforth. Excellent. Thank you for doing that. Excellent. Cool. So we've got something coming up.
Can you tell we're tired today?
Well, there's that. Now, I've got something interesting coming up, or in the pipeline, I should say.
Okay.
Because we're going to have our first behind-the-scenes feature.
Oh, yes.
Coming up.
Yes.
Batman.
Oh, but yeah, today I'm Batman. Is that how he says it?
Apparently, I'm Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Which, I can let my hair down. It's all good.
You've not got the legs for it.
Anyway, so behind the scenes. Now, a little while ago, we went to meet our friend David Williams in the midst of the Welsh forest.
Oh yeah.
And obviously we created an episode out of that, which was episode 70, where we went to see his van. He's currently in Iceland as we're recording this episode. But by the time this comes out, he might be on his way to Finland, I believe, or Norway.
Is that his next journey? Yeah, that sounds right.
So, but when we went to meet with him, we actually shot a whole lot of behind the scenes footage, which was really fun to do.
It was fun to do. Was it the first lot of BTS stuff we've done in that way?
Yeah,
I think it might be, right? Yeah. So it's, as with anything new, is working out how to do it. Well, do it efficiently,
Yeah, and it was also our first road trip.
Yeah.
Other than we went to London for our first anniversary episode.
That's true, and we know how the BTS went for that.
Yeah, I think it's 1 minute or 2 minutes. I think we got 2 minutes of usable material out of a full day. But so yeah, going to Wales, that was our second shot at that.
Yeah, it was, and it went a little bit better this time, didn't it?
It was fun. It was actually,
So for those of you watching on YouTube, you are currently hearing my cat and watching my cat run back and forward on the sofa there. I don't know what's going on. Anyway,
So it was interesting because we were sitting on that behind the scenes footage for a little while, and then we thought, well, we'll dig it out and we'll make something out of it. And I think as we were in the process of doing that, it just turned out to be a really fun little project.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the stuff that you don't see when you actually watch the episode.
Yeah,
so.
It's personally I like watching that stuff from other people because it there's a couple of reasons. It's that voyeuristic kind of side of people's personalities that they like, and like seeing what goes into making the main video that you saw. I find it feels like you're a bit like you're there. I always pick up some tip or idea of saying, how's he licing that? What gears are he using on that? And you can just see, whether they're talking about it or not, you can still see it half the time. And that just can generate new, fresh ideas. And that's exciting. That's fun for me to watch. I generally prefer watching that kind of stuff than I do watching whatever the main video was about. Because I can take from it what I want to take from it rather than what I'm being told to take from it.
Yeah, because the thing about this particular episode was that, the main part of it was basically us sitting by a campfire, talking.
Yeah.
You're talking to Dave about his van and about the adventures that he was planning.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did a van walkthrough tour thing. And what was really interesting was, I remember, I was filming you whilst you were filming Dave.
Yeah.
And so what I managed to do was I managed to synchronize it so you can basically see the original van footage, but at the same time you can see me filming you. So you get that real like first-hand view of what's happening, as if you were
Is
there.
that technically first hand?
I don't know.
Is that second hand?
It's getting too complicated.
Who was filming you, filming me?
I
Filming
remember there
Dave?
was a point where Dave was filming me, filming you.
While I was still filming him?
Whilst I think you were filming the
Is this
van
some
at the time.
weird little freeway going on? That's very
I don't know.
strange. Very, very
Wow.
strange.
So
This is no longer the Camera Shake podcast. This is
we're shaking it up again. But yeah, so it turned out to be really quite fun.
Yeah.
You know, we've left it relatively raw. So, you know,
oh, totally wrong.
so
Yeah.
you can really see you know, what was happening behind the scenes. But, you know, again, if you want to have a look at that, you know, head over to camerashakepodcast.com, hit the join the community button, and within the next week or so, you will be the first to be able to see that very video. So this is at this point exclusively for members of our community, which should be
Absolutely.
really good crack.
The other thing we did on that day was GoPro'd it in the car.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
And that was, what did we get? I got a old suction cup Dubry, whatever
Yes. Yeah.
whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. That went on the windscreen and just, you know, tilted the camera up and just filmed us whenever we were ready to go, right?
Yeah.
Now, should we talk about the audio? Because we're not sure what's going to happen with that yet.
Yeah, so I mean, I tell you what, we're not going to give too much away, but there was a point when I jumped into Dave's van. We basically met up with Dave. I jumped into this van, and then you were following the van, and of course you were filming stuff whilst, unbeknownst to me, whilst I was in the van, and I only got to see that footage when you sent that footage over to me. And so, you know, imagine my surprise when I was like...
You saw it like 2 days ago for the first time.
When I was like sifting through the GoPro footage, I'm like, oh, okay, that's funny. Anyway, so there are a lot of like hidden gems in there, I would say.
Yes, I am a hidden gem.
This is well worth checking out. Yeah, so that's, again, you know, that's going to be, if you head over to camerashakepodcast.com, you know, hit the join the community button, and then within the next week or so, you'll be able to see that special footage, which should be super awesome.
Good times.
Now, Christmas isn't far. It's not far off.
Humbug.
Humbug. It's like from how many weeks? Is it 2 weeks?
I've been too busy to begin thinking about it, let alone think about presents and all. Not that I generally do presents all that often. I have to say I am a humbug in that respect.
Well,
you know, and do you know what most of the reason is? And this is no disrespect to anyone who's ever got me a present at Christmas. It's generally something I don't want. Okay?
Yeah.
It's just generic stuff, right? It's nothing I quote unquote asked for or would ever buy myself. And there is a reason for that. Well, there's two reasons. One is anything that I actually want, I generally just get during the course of the year because I want it. And if I want it, I need it.
Yeah.
That's how I justify it. If I want it, I need it. It's not the other way around. And the other thing is, no one ever knows what to buy me because I generally buy everything I want to get over the course of a year.
Yeah.
So I'm impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I've simulations of, my wife keeps telling me that I have very expensive taste. Because the thing is, you know,
I can't work out whether that was a slight dig at you or a compliment to her.
Well, I mean, yeah, probably a little bit of both. But I mean, it's true to say that anything to do with photography is, you know, or can get really quite pricey.
It can,
you know,
and
so,
God forbid someone who's not a photographer tries to buy something for you, photography related, not knowing, without asking you first.
Well, I mean, I think we've probably both been through the, like, you know, the lens cup type. Have you ever gotten like a Canon lens?
No.
24-70
No.
as a cup?
No.
Really?
No, I haven't.
I've had
No.
several of those. I've had two of those, I remember.
Really?
Yeah. Both Canon.
Really?
What can I say? I mean,
Superb.
Yeah, that just says everything, right?
People are trying to give you a hint.
Well, maybe. But, you know, or one of my personal favorites was a t-shirt that says, you know, something like, everybody thinks they're a photographer until, and then manual. You like a manual.
Oh, yeah.
So
I think people generally just steer clear of that stuff for me, except all the cameras I've got over there. And if you go back to some earlier episodes about a year ago, where we had a slightly different setup, you'll see that there are some cameras kind of behind us, technically near the mirror, and all of those cameras, bar one, were presents.
And I remember when you got those, and they're like film cameras, as in movie cameras.
Yeah, two of them. One's a stills camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of thing. I mean, that kind of thing
cool.
is interesting.
They were very cool to receive. I love those things.
Yeah. See, that's a good idea. Maybe, that's actually a very good idea. If you have any great ideas for, Christmas presents for photographers, then let us know, because, I will pass it on to my wife and my children, who think, they can get away with buying me Reese's.
Yeah.
Peanut butter cups.
You pretty much get something oddly, loosely related to photography. You get something Star Wars related, or you get something chocolate related.
Totally.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or something Czech.
Yeah, and I'm, who am I to decline that?
You were also wearing black jeans for the first time. I've never seen you in black jeans before.
That is because
It's my style rubbing off.
Absolutely rubbing off, yeah. That's right. Well, it's because I have owned black jeans in the past, but not, I'm a blue jean kind of guy.
Are they Levi's?
They are indeed.
They are indeed Levi's.
Yeah.
Levi's. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's, what's your ideal photographer's Christmas presents? Like, I've been thinking about this, what's the kind of thing that you can always need as a photographer? That's not necessarily like anything flashy or exciting, but something like, memory cards.
Consumables, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, there's the kind of stuff that would actually be useful. Like,
Yeah.
like I said, your memory cards, lens cloths. All of the really sexy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, both of those for sure, although they also need to be the right memory cards.
Well,
so that's a slight issue.
Yeah. Filters.
Filters are always nice. Spare batteries are always nice as well. Particularly...
Well, your batteries are expensive.
All the cash for those, they're, 120 odd quid per battery? For the C70?
Oh, really? Okay. I thought it was more like on the 250 side or something.
You can get one that's double the size for that.
Okay.
But it is physically double the size too, which is kind of understandable. I just don't warrant it. Most of the time I'm able to plug it in via DC anyway. So it's, not a problem. But batteries are always nice. What else?
Camera bags. I think camera bags are tricky, man.
Camera bags, they're personal as well.
Yeah, very.
And I've got enough bags floating around. I don't need another one knocking about.
Yeah, on the flip side, one can never have enough bags.
I almost bought you a bag the other week.
Did you?
Yeah, and I was going to go back and get it because I thought, no, wait, he's already got one. Right. But it was a World War I gas mask bag, like the one you've got.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I think it came with the gas mask as well.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
In some vintage shop down near Bournemouth. Well, no, sorry, down near Brighton. Right. A place called Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a few months ago now. I'd forgotten all about that. Oh, well, there you go.
So here's a tip for all of you uninitiated. World War II gas mask bags, or World War I or whatever they are, World War II, I guess, make really good bags for cameras. As in, like, when you're like on a little trip or something, you're taking
one camera, one lens.
Exactly, that's the thing. They make a really nice little carry around.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, they look great.
Yeah, true.
They look really good.
And the fact that they're still around means they're really, sturdy and solid.
Does yours still smell like mustard gas?
No, but it still smells of the. There was I found a little box in it, like a little case that contained like a sort of like a rubbery substance. I guess that it's like a I don't know. It's like
camera shakes it up again.
Yeah, like a fatty sort of substance. I think what they used to do was they used to lubricate the rubber on the gas mask with it, and that really smelled bad. So that bag actually smells of that. So yeah.
Well, you must be able to get rid of that smell somehow. No?
Oh, you can wash it. No, because I'm sort of It's kind of like a canvasy sort of material, and I don't really want to wash it.
Dry clean it? Oh, I don't know. It's
I
a
don't know.
bag.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that important.
No.
But yeah. So and then I have a flare gun bag, which is the perfect bag for the dog. You take all of his dog stuff out.
Yeah, you go.
balls and like his water bottle and all that kind of jazz.
Nice.
So yeah.
The dog has his own sack.
Not for much longer.
That's true, yeah.
Not for much longer.
That's true, poor boy.
Yeah.
Poor boy.
Again, not for much longer. So
Oh man.
yeah, bags are good, but they're, personal. I mean, I think, if you're not a photographer, obviously it's extremely difficult to know what to buy.
Oh, it's impossible.
Yeah.
I think it's just as hard for a photographer to buy another photographer a present.
Oh, for sure.
It's
Probably even worse.
You don't necessarily, yeah, it probably is worse. You can't be sure what the other person's really going to want, and you just don't know.
Because the things you need are typically things like, they're really boring things like light stands. I don't need a light stand. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Although, I mean, to be honest, I don't need that. I have like a whole room full of light stands. You can always Frankenstein some together in the end. It's a bit like music stands if you're into music, I guess.
Clamps.
Clamps are always good.
Cool little things like that would be nice.
Yeah.
A platypod. You can get me one of them if you want.
That's right. If you're listening. Platypod.
And a platypod.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have both of those, please.
Yeah. Tripods, yeah. Christmas presents. Well, again, if you can think of any interesting Christmas presents for photographers, then let us know. Not only because, it'll give me an idea as to what to buy you for Christmas.
Ah, yeah.
I was going to say for Brexit. Happy Brexit, everyone.
Do you know how many years ago that was now?
Was it 2 years ago?
When did it actually come in force? Was it last January? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who cares?
So it's about a year ago.
It's the worst subject in the world.
Oh, well. So, cool. Now,
what else we got?
I'll tell you what, actually, there's one thing that comes to mind. One thing I read about the other day. This is hilarious. So this guy called Kyle Sheely, or Sheely, I don't know. Not sure how to pronounce it.
Sheila.
Kyle Sheila. Let's stick with that. But so the story was his dad or his parents had a family photo in their living room of like him and his brothers and sisters, and and his mom and dad. And what happened was that when this photo was taken, I guess several decades ago, or whatever, the photographer basically got his dad to sort of angle his head, or to tilt his head, whilst everybody else in the photograph held their head straight, right? And so as a consequence, his dad used to hate that picture.
Why did the photographer do that?
I don't know. It was just which is one of these things. But anyway, so his dad hated that image, and his mom was sentimentally attached to it, and so therefore it hung in the living room, right, for all these years. And so this guy Kylie, he kind of thought like, well, you know what, I can fix that for my dad because I've got Photoshop skills. And he went in and he basically straightened out his dad's head in the photo, but then thought, wouldn't it be funny if I now tilted everybody else's heads? And so he did, and then he had it printed and framed, and gave it to his dad his parents as a Christmas present. And needless to say, it was hilarious.
Love that.
I think
a cracking idea.
I read about this, or I saw it on YouTube or something like that. We'll put the link in the description because that was super hilarious, super funny thing.
How should we actually get educational for a second?
Educational.
Yeah.
God.
How would you go about doing that in Photoshop? Because I'm not sure I've done that before, and I'm just trying to rack my brains as the right process to go about doing it.
Oh, so
have you done something like that?
Yeah,
before?
yeah, sure. I mean, basically, what you do is you cut out the head, essentially. Put it in a new layer, and then you have the head itself. You basically then move it into the position that you want it to be in. And then you essentially mask out everything behind it. What you'll find is most likely is you find part of the original head underneath, which then you have to clone out, obviously,
right?
And make arrangements for that. So that's how you do it. You basically cut out the head, copy it onto a separate layer, and then.
And what would you typically use to cut out that head? How
You,
would you select that?
uh,
Manually?
Manually, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Have you been using the object selection tool?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Yeah. How are you finding it?
So it depends on the situation, really. It really depends on the situation and what it is that you're doing. So, and how precise things need to be and stuff like that. So typically, you need to go into the selection menu and then basically, refine it a little bit. But sometimes, again, depending on what it is, sometimes it works straight out the box.
Did you try out the selection tool that came into Lightroom weeks ago, months ago, whenever it was?
Yes. Okay. So I haven't per se. I mean, I have obviously worked with a new version of Lightroom quite a lot. And so the way you set filters is a little bit different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, this is exactly the same functionality, but it's, what it does is it allows you to either very easily actually select your main subject, or select the background, or select the sky.
Yeah.
And so what you can do then is
it's good at it too.
Yeah, it's very good at it actually. And so what it allows you to do is, for instance, let's say you have a subject in front of some background, let's say landscape or whatever it is, and you want to either change the sky or you want to change the exposure on the sky or the exposure on the main subject. Let's say you want to darken down the background a little bit and maybe brighten up the subject, maybe to create a little bit more of separation or whatever it may be. And that's really easily doable now.
It's one less thing to go outside of Lightroom to Photoshop to do, for example.
Yes, and I mean, you could have done
using a brush or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could have done it in Lightroom before, but it was a matter of using brushes and...
It's made the because I'll often desaturate the background from the subject a little bit as well.
True.
And it's just quick. It's just quick and easy. And you don't need... It's just a quick selection. It's done. It's no big deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I say, it's horses for courses.
Yeah.
So, if you want to do anything, if you want to select certain things like very precisely, for instance, if you're doing composites or something, then of course, I mean, Photoshop is clearly the way to go. And there's a whole array.
But you're still not working in layers in Lightroom, right?
Yes,
so it's,
correct. I mean,
you're still working on that one layer, so to speak.
Exactly,
all the time.
and that has certain disadvantages in certain situations, and advantages in other situations. So, sometimes doing something similar in Photoshop is actually more convoluted than it maybe needs to be. Yet you can be a little bit more precise or accurate, but then sometimes you don't need to be accurate.
Yeah.
So. I'll give you a good example. I shot a series of thumbnails for somebody only recently, and they were basically it's just the main character in front of a white background, and the idea was to basically create two versions, one just on a white background and then one where he's cut out as a PNG, so with the transparent background, so he can basically then superimpose that over any whatever thumbnail he was creating. And the selection in that was super simple, super fast. No problem. It was literally just the subject selection tool in Photoshop. It did a brilliant job every time. And it was for the purpose, it was absolutely good enough.
Yeah.
And that's the thing to remember, if you're doing something that, like if you're putting a movie poster together, that's going to be printed in like whatever huge format or something, and it needs to be super accurate, you're going to have to go in and do some more detailed work. If you're doing something like this, that's going to be a thumbnail that people are going to be looking at like on their phone or something. You don't actually have to be that super precise.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
So it depends on what it is that you're doing. And I think that's why these tools are so brilliant, because they make your workflow, or they speed up your workflow immensely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I managed to, I had quite a few of those. I do maybe like 20, 25 or something. And I really could burn through them really quite quickly.
Yeah.
So,
that's good, man. It took me a moment when they first made that update in Lightroom to work out how they were doing the different what's the word I'm looking for now?
Filters?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And how they were separating them out in that little new kind of
little box
sidebar, if you like. But as soon as I kind of sussed that, it was fine. Totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's in principle, it's still the same thing as it was before. It's just the way to get to the filter is slightly different.
Now you can actually see what's there rather than having to see the dots that are on your image and click on the one you want to adjust.
Yeah, so weirdly, we still don't have layers in Lightroom, but weirdly, we have filter layers you want to call it that, because that's kind of what it is.
Kind of what it is. Yeah.
So yeah, but it's it's good. I like the way they put new functionality.
Yeah,
in.
totally.
Well, it's just like, you remember, like about a year ago, Adobe came out, or Photoshop came out with the sky replacement tool, and again, similar idea. The AI in that is actually so good that for most intents and purposes, replacing a sky using that tool is super quick, super easy.
Yeah.
If you're a property photographer, for example, and you want to replace the sky, because I don't know, maybe it was a dreary day or something like that.
Yeah.
Then,
or like most of them do when they take the photos when it's raining and still leave the rain on the floor.
I mean, it's no surprise. It's interesting, when you go to like an estate agent, a realtor or estate agent, as we call it over here. You look in the shop window and you basically see all of these images of these houses, and like every image has a blue sky in the background, and you're going to go, well, we don't have that many blue sky days in the UK. I mean, or is it that on
he was super busy that day?
Yeah, exactly. Like everyone went out on that one day, blue skies. Woo! I mean, clearly, a large proportion of those skies are fake.
Yeah,
doesn't matter though. I mean, again, for this particular purpose, who cares?
Exactly.
Because would you buy a house that's like that looks dreary?
At that point, you're not selling the house; you're selling the idea of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're depicting the house. I mean, it's a bit like headshots, where you basically you're creating an image of the way somebody looks on their best day. That's the idea, I think. Rather than like if somebody's gotten up on the wrong side of the bed, had a really crappy day, and then turns up for a headshot session. You just want to give them something that makes them look like they look on a really good day.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that, you're faking anything or anything else. It just means, you give them a little bit of, credo in that respect. So,
exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Cool.
Now, I came across something that I found actually really, an interesting read. There was an article called "The 6 Signs You Don't Have What It Takes to Be a Pro Photographer."
Oh,
so 6 signs you don't have what it takes to be a pro photographer. And as I was reading it, I was kind of thinking, well, okay, A, what does that even mean? And B, maybe in some instances I sort of agreed with the article, and in other instances I kind of thought it was a little far-fetched.
Yeah.
I mean,
sounds like a slightly clickbaity title.
Yeah, maybe, but we're all fall for clickbait, sure.
Yeah,
surely, once in a while. So, not that our video titles were ever clickbaity, ever.
No,
ever.
Not once.
Yeah, not once. So one thing was, for example, blaming other people for your own failures.
Okay, that's a life lesson, though.
That's totally life. That's exactly what I thought.
That's nothing to do with photography. It's related to anything you do in life.
That's related to growing up.
Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's a conversation I have with...
Let me know when you finished.
Well, it's a conversation I have with my kids all the time. It's this age-old thing. It's like, if something happens, you make a mistake, own it. Yeah. And people will respect you for it.
Absolutely.
And actually the consequences are going to be much less severe.
If you go through, your job or life, just blaming other people for things that you do wrong, it just makes you look ridiculous. But you do that, particularly when you're younger.
Oh, for sure.
It's really normal.
Yeah, kids do it all the time.
It's really, really normal. Even throughout your 20s, you're still like that because you're still learning, you're still finding your way.
What I like about kids sometimes is they have this like really abstract logic. Well, they pick up a glass of water, drop it on the floor, and then they go, "Oh, it wasn't my fault." I saw you just drop it. Oh yeah, it was the glass's fault because it was slippery.
You blame that inanimate object. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like, right. But yeah. So I mean, blaming other people for your own failures is really it does two things. I mean, first of all, it doesn't do you any favors, but also, it means you're not going to be progressing because if we learn from our own mistakes, then that's what kind of gets us. That's what allows us to develop and to get better. And the first number one thing there is that we have to admit to ourselves that we've made something,
you know,
did something wrong.
And it's one of those where people don't expect you to be perfect. People don't believe anybody is perfect. People expect mistakes to happen, no matter what job it is, what it is you're actually. It doesn't matter what you're doing. What's really important is how you react to that mistake and how you correct it. Whether it's happening on the shoot at that moment, it's working out. This is a problem. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I've messed that up. Or whatever I've done, I should have done this. How do you correct that problem in the situation is what makes you brilliant at what you do, or maybe not quite so brilliant.
And of course, if you think about the conversations that we've had with several guests on the show, it's this constant like pushing forward, like pushing through your mistakes, you're learning from them, and then using that knowledge to improve yourself and to get better. And I think that if you're constantly blaming other people for your failures, then you're really putting a roadblock in your own way of getting better.
You stop your own progression.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so that's one of those things. So I mean, in a sense, I sort of agree with that statement. That
I can 100% agree with it. I don't think it has anything to do with photography as such.
Yeah, it's a life thing.
Yeah. What was number 2?
Yeah. So number 2 was the inability to change and adapt.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think, that's
another life lesson right there.
Well, exactly. I mean, in photography, in particular, it's
quite connected to the first one.
Yeah, and you can kind of sort of see how, when things change. Like, for instance, when I don't know, I'm guessing because I sort of somehow remember it, but not really. When film changed to digital, for example, I'm guessing there were a whole bunch of people who just weren't ready for that change. And likewise, when DSLRs changed to mirrorless, similar sort of thing. That can be hard to digest maybe when a change like that happens and you're so stuck in your ways and there's certain things you've done one way.
So I would relate this. So for those of you out there who, have a regular day job, perhaps you work in an office, you've probably seen this there. If you've been at a particular company for an extended period of time, you will find that people, companies, departments, they develop and they change and they morph and they ebb and flow depending on what's going on with the business. But there are many people who, and I would include myself in this some time ago for sure, would find it very, very difficult to see things change and develop and progress forward when you've got so used to what's going on and being comfortable with how things were, the status quo. And so you find that they ultimately become resentful because they are the ones that aren't trying to adapt to the new situation. Yeah. And that becomes a problem. All it does is it makes you bitter. It makes you bitter. I promise you, I've seen it happen to myself.
This thing like people usually call themselves authentic at that point.
It's that's like a cop out right there.
What does it even mean?
That's amazing.
No idea.
Authentic.
That really does some really good examples. In this particular article, one example was Kodak. And, I guess that's actually a really good example. That's a good example for a company that wasn't ready to change. And therefore ultimately went under.
Yeah.
And who would have thought that like back when I was a kid, like Kodak was like one of the biggest, film manufacturers or businesses, companies in the photo world.
Yeah.
And that's obviously gone downhill.
So. Yeah. And we've probably seen it a lot over the last 18 months or so with COVID, those businesses who had the foresight in advance to see, okay, online shopping is going to be the future for the majority of things. Let's get ourselves into that and make sure we're doing it.
Apparently twice as many senior citizens are using online shopping now compared to before the pandemic.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that's, that's an interesting statistic.
There's lots of downsides to doing it that way, but there are so many positives.
Yeah. All right. So number 3 was being too proud.
These are all kind of saying the same thing, aren't they?
Well, kind of.
Yeah, that's a toughie. That's a difficult one to overcome.
Do you think the first thing he mentions is something like, that mainly applies to men? Do you agree with that?
No, not necessarily. I think it's fair to say that men are generally slightly more proud than women. I think it's a weird, stupid masculinity type thing that we have, but it's probably true. But I know many women are just as proud as I am. You know, it's.
I'll tell you where I see the problem with that is, and I find this in myself a lot. You know, I'm always of the opinion that, you know, once, you know, I have an idea and then I go and execute it. And then once that idea is done, of course, you know, if you think you've created something really special or you're really happy with the result, you know, the portrait or whatever, of course you're proud, rightly so. You can be proud.
Absolutely, should be.
But, you know, for me, it's always like when I get to the finished product, I'm already playing with other ideas. And, you know, I never rest on those laurels for too long. I just go on and start working on the next thing, because you know, we talked about this before. It's the process of creating something that, you know, attracts me to actually creating something, and it's not so much the finished article. What happens is you end up building up a nice little sort of almost like library of work that way. You know, I think if you do something and then you spend too much time resting on your own laurels there, then that just takes you away from actually creating more work, you know? And then I think that could probably lead to, like, you know, to the one trick pony type of affair. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. It is quite possible that, I think, you know,
I mean, does that mean though that you're not a pro photographer though? I mean, this is like, you know, in context, I kind of think, well, you know, there are photographers who do one thing, and they do one thing and do it extremely well, and then it's just literally just a matter of shoot, repeat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, headshot photographers very often, you know, if they really do absolutely nothing else than that one thing, you can look at that and you can go, well, okay, what else you got?
Yeah.
You know, and
at the very least, do something else just to stop yourself getting disillusioned with photography, because you are just doing the same thing over and over and over. You've got superb at it.
And, you know, and sometimes it's well worth looking at, you know, if you, for instance, I remember when I first discovered Peter Hurley's work, headshot work, you know, I was really, really impressed with what he does. And, you know, and of course, because he's so known in the world of headshot photography, it's very easy to miss some of the other stuff that he does. And then I came across a portrait series that he'd done in Hawaii. And actually, these portraits are great.
Yeah, they're cool.
They're really, really cool.
Quality.
And it really tells you there's much more to him than just shooting headshots. You know, much, much more. And that's the thing. So the fourth point was indifference.
What did he mean by that?
So it's one of these things where I think, you know, as a creative in general, and I think most creatives possess this curiosity when it comes to other people's work, for example. You know, where you look at something and you go, wow, you know, I don't know how, either like I've never seen that done before, or it's like, I wonder how that's been done, or that's like just such a striking image, or, you know, that sort of thing. You know, is when we would talk about this all the time, like on and off air, actually. You know, we come across something, we're like, oh, have you seen this? Blah, 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 you know. So, so I think you need that curiosity, not only, you know, I mean, mainly, really, again, to develop yourself, you know. And indifference in that context is like when you really just, you know, you put your blinkers on and you're really just not interested in anybody else's work.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think because you go through stages, don't you? When you're really starting out and you're learning, I think the majority of people are learning because they love doing it and they love learning. So you're always on the lookout for what's going on, what's new, how do I do that, how does that work, how do I get all of that kind of stuff. And that you do that by looking at other people's work a lot of the time. Then you get to a certain stage where you're really competent, you're quite accomplished with what you're doing. And I think that curiosity can wane a little bit because you've got all that skill there, and you you've got really good at what you do, but you can rely on that or too much. Not rely, that's the wrong word, but you can rest on that a little bit too much and just think, oh, I'm really good at this now. But actually that, again, just hinders you. The more you look around and you look at other people's work, the more you're going to start spotting things that you aren't doing, or you'll start realizing they're doing it exactly the same way as I'm doing it, but why does theirs look like that and mine doesn't look quite the same?
Yeah.
What is it that's different? What are they doing differently? And that's when you reach a different stage of your learning, because you're now into the minutiae of inches with where the light's placed to the difference that it makes.
Yeah.
The tenth of power change that just makes that little, or whatever it might be.
It's also the deconstruction part of it. I think that's really interesting. I remember the first time I shot a boxing match or fight, right? And
hello, cats.
And
you know what, she can stay. So
I remember there were two rings. There were two fights going on at the same time, and I was shooting one ring. There was another photographer shooting another ring, and so we were getting ready, and we're having a chat and everything, and then we were just casually chatting about camera settings. And it turned out that his settings are completely different from mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of thought, well, some of it made sense, some of it didn't make sense, and I'm just, and I was just mulling it over in my head, thinking like, why is he making these decisions? But he had way more experience shooting, fights than compared to me, and so I think I shot the first two fights. They're relatively short, these kind of fights, obviously, because it's like three rounds, and usually somebody goes down.
Yeah.
And I shot the first couple of fights, and I kept thinking, okay, my plan isn't 100% working, right? And then I sort of switched to the sort of settings that we discussed. And actually, once you then put into action, you realize, okay, there's a sound logic to this, because things are happening so fast that you really don't have time to react. So this whole thing about shooting manual, for example, okay, that's all a great idea and everything, and maybe it makes you feel like you're somehow superior because you're shooting in manual or whatever. But the reality is, in this particular situation, your camera can react quicker on some of the sort of semi-automatic modes than you can, and that's what gives you the extra kind of headspace to really make sure you hit the button or you hit the shutter at the right moment.
So what have you been using shutter priority?
So there were a number of different changes. Like he used auto ISO, which I literally never used before. But it made perfect sense. Again, because of the way the whole thing was lit, the lighting conditions were changing. I went into it thinking, oh, this is going to be very similar to a concert. Yep. Crap light and people moving fast. I mean, this is basically what a concert is. But the difference really is that a boxing match is completely different from a concert, because people actually move a lot faster, and there's different outcomes that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
That kind of that shot where somebody's, you basically capture the frame where he's just hitting the face and the glove makes contact with the face, for example, and you see spit and sweat, frozen in the air. That's a classic shot, backlit possibly. Do you know what I mean? That's sort of a classic shot. It's really difficult to get actually in the context of an actual fight.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Where you've got to be in the right place at the right time. And this is one of the problems when you're shooting, a fight like that, is you're constantly roaming around the ring. There's so many different things you got to take care of. There's so many different shots that you have to get. And there are also certain things you have to avoid, like blood, for example, right, in this particular context. So it's actually, if you can lay off some of the decision making and outsource that to the computer brain in your camera, then that's great.
Yeah.
My pride went straight back into my pocket, and I went like, semi-automatic modes, okay,
nice.
So
like it.
So yeah,
like it. Totally all right with that. If it gets you the shot, it gets you the shot.
Well, whatever makes, absolutely, whatever gets you the result.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next thing was not doing enough relevant work. And that's, I think, probably the biggest one for me.
Finally, one that isn't just a life lesson.
I mean, that not doing enough relevant work really means that you're not really creating a body of work.
Yes.
And that, in my experience, is one of the biggest mistakes that people make, especially in the beginning, because very often you find people like, skidding from one type of photography to another type of photography, and then shoot like some properties, and then shoot some headshots, and then shoot some portraits, and then shoot some newborn stuff, and then shoot some weddings, and shoot whatever. And in the beginning, because it's easy to sort of fall into the trap, and of course, you're still learning, I guess, and
there's actually a benefit to doing it as well. I actually think it's a good thing to do that, to diversify it. At the beginning, you're learning. You want to get yourself in as many different situations as you possibly can, because it will make you better at what you do. Now, whether you display and share all of that work, now that's a different question.
Oh,
perhaps 100%. If you really want to go down the wedding photography route, but you're doing all these other things to keep to make money, to learn, then perhaps separate that out entirely. You want a dedicated wedding side to your business. That is, when people are looking for weddings, they only find that stuff. Yeah. If you do your personal street photography, keep that on your personal account, and so on and so on and so on.
I mean, I think you're right. There's this thing where especially in the beginning, a lot of people find that they want to share everything that they do, and of course, what it does is ultimately confuses everyone.
Yeah,
and so it's just this whole thing about being a jack of all trades and master of none type of thing. I'm sure as photographers, we all shoot a whole lot of stuff that don't fall within the the remit of what we do professionally, or what we want to be known for, or what we are known for, or whatever.
Yeah.
And the only difference is, if I shot a wedding tomorrow because somebody asked me or whatever, you would never see that on my website, and you would also never see that on my social media ever, because it's not really what I do. I have shot some weddings, but I'm not a wedding photographer, but I have shot some weddings before. Mm-hmm. And of course I've done it, as favors and because people ask and whatnot. But that's not really what I do. So as a consequence, you're not really going to find that anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many shoots have we done that were either designed to stretch our muscle a little bit, or, or were a learning experience, or didn't go down well at all?
Many.
You never see that stuff.
No.
This is always that's the thing that makes me chuckle a little bit, especially when it comes to social media. When people say, "Oh, I'm following your, I don't know, Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, social media profile, and your photos are amazing." It's like, okay, well, thank you. What you don't know and what you don't see are all the other hundreds or thousands of shots that are absolute crap. So maybe I'm just a little bit better at, filtering out the crap from the gold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can, I feel like I don't have to post everything.
No.
Like sometimes you see that, sometimes like people post every single picture they take, and you just go, well, there's no need for people to see what I'm eating for dinner.
Yeah, there's one thing. There's one thing putting a bunch of stuff on your stories on Instagram, for example, because they're gone within 24 hours, and it just
that's true.
That's a separate sort of social media strategy, if you like. That's a bit separate to the whole thing. But diversifying and doing. For example, today we just did a shoot for a school.
Yeah,
right, and we've done loads of stuff for schools over the years.
Sure,
we don't share that stuff.
No.
Mostly because kids are involved and you can't share.
Yeah, mostly because of GDPR.
We rarely talk about it either, because it's just something that we do, and it
and also quite like doing it.
We enjoy doing it. It's it helps the schools out, helps the kids out. They get a different experience that they haven't had before, with cameras there and all that kind of stuff, and that's great for them. But frankly, we also do it to make some more money. And
sure, absolutely.
And things are, particularly at this time, things are taking their time to rebuild after, we're still in the middle of COVID, I should say, right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. it's normal.
Yeah.
But you don't have to share it all. Because that's not something we necessarily want to be known for, but it is something that we do.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about relevant work also is, to really spend the time on things that actually matter. In a different thing, it's like, for instance, you can spend days, weeks, designing your logo, but ultimately, or designing your website or whatever else, ultimately, people need to see your work. That's what you need to work on. It's actually your work.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to go, ooh, Kirsten's got a super awesome logo. I love the logo, but his photos are shit. I mean, you're not going to win anything. I'd rather it'll just simply say my name in some god-awful font, and the work's amazing.
Okay.
So,
done.
It's like, what do you spend the time on,
Yeah.
I think that's, that's another thing to remember, I think. So in that sense, I agree with that. The next one was not learning light.
Okay.
And that's, I have to say, that is probably my biggest bugbear. How many times do you speak to other photographers and go like, oh, I'm just an available light photographer. That's what I do. And it's like, you go, okay, well, all right, that's getting you out of a fix.
Yeah.
And it's also limits what you can do because you're relying on something that's totally unreliable, especially where we live. Yeah,
that's right. Absolutely right. Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because it's one of those things that you can learn a little and it will take you a massively long way.
Sure.
And then obviously you can go really in depth with it and all sorts. But if you learn couple of fundamental principles and a handful of techniques.
Do you think people tend to shy away from learning how to use, speed lights or studio strobes? And, do you think they shy away from that because they're sort of intimidated?
Yeah, I do. I think that's exactly what it is. And there's no reason to be, because I don't know if there's an old stick. Maybe it was harder to do it in the past. Right, but it's not. It's as easy as anything.
Well, I mean, in the days of film, you never knew what you were going to get. Now you can review it
exactly.
The image immediately. In fact, I bought a dummy head a few weeks ago called Murphy.
Creeps me the out.
It's a little bit creepy. But it's a dummy head. The reason I bought it, you can stick it on a nightstand. It's kind of cool. It's got a little mount, so you can stick it on a nightstand and you can adjust the height. Whatever.
So it looks like a head on a spike.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It looks exactly like a head on a spike. But the cool thing about that is you can use that as your model when you're experimenting with different, different modifiers or different ways of lighting or whatever else.
Tell me when you're filming yourself at home for the odd episode here and there. Tell me you're putting that up for focus.
I know, but it's a damn good idea. Actually, that's a really good idea.
There you go. There you go. You can actually
nice.
even get eye focus.
Because
as we know, your autofocus system is interesting.
If I did have if I did have eye focus in my ancient camera, but yeah, I think, to be honest, I would add one of the
your camera's made of lead, isn't it? I forget.
Yeah. One of the things I would add to this list is I always find that the difference between, this is often my impression, and sometimes obviously it doesn't always apply. I'm generalizing, but I very often find that when you speak to amateur photographers or hobbyists, I would say, who have whatever job and disposable income, the conversation very often goes towards like, oh, what's the latest lens they bought or latest camera body they bought or whatever. When you speak to professionals, it's like everybody's sort of realizing that every time you spend money, you have to have a pretty damn good business reason as to why you're investing into a piece of kit. Because if it doesn't make you any money back, there really is no reason why you should be spending money on it.
Yeah.
That's always
that's very true.
That's the kind of critical thought. In fact, I did a lighting workshop with a photographer the other day, which was super interesting. And I actually learned a whole bunch of stuff. But because he was shooting with umbrellas, I really virtually almost, well, not never, but I very rarely shoot with umbrellas because I just love softboxes so much. But his umbrellas were literally 30 years old.
Wow.
did they work any worse than the latest whatever? No, they don't. I mean, he spent zero money, and his strobes were bloody ancient as well. The images he got were amazing.
Yeah.
It's
only worth changing stuff or upgrading stuff if it is broken.
Sure.
Is now actively hindering you from something that you need or want to achieve.
That's a good reason.
For example, just let's take your 750.
Mm-hmm.
The video's all right now, actually. The 1080, it's actually not bad at all.
Yeah.
There's going to come a point soon where you're going to need 4K.
Yes, so that's true.
So that's when that time comes. I don't think that time's necessarily here right now, but when that time comes, that and then may become a hindrance.
Yeah, absolutely.
For you to create what you want to create. Yeah. That's just one example of a time where it might be worth considering.
Yeah. I mean, that's
it's like me upgrading from Nikon stills and Panasonic video to an entire Canon system.
Yeah, like an integrated system. Sure.
There were. We've talked about this before. We don't have to go into it in any kind of detail right now. But it was one, getting it all within one brand. Two, the video capabilities of the GH5S. While the quality of video was great, the autofocus became a complete hindrance for me and just didn't do what I needed to do. You could only get 120 in 1080p. Had no autofocus in 120. That, for me, became a massive hindrance then. Yeah. It had to change. I could no longer create what I wanted to create with that camera. It was an APS-C stills camera that I had as well. Was starting, that's not a bad thing. I'm not dissing that in any way, but I wanted some better low light performance.
Was it a D70-200 yet?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Okay. I wanted better low light performance from my stills camera. And I needed a secondary camera that shot video, and the video on that was atrocious.
Yeah.
So they're two of the big reasons why I shifted at that point, and that made financially it was a big hit.
Yeah, massive.
But in the long run, think of all the jobs we've done since I changed that gear.
Well, and the beauty of it is, of course, now because it's all part of the same infrastructure, or environment. You can interchange lenses, and you have a lot more options. Because I remember you had a whole set of Panasonic lenses and a whole set of Nikon lenses, and it was like, okay, well, it's a lot of lenses. And so you're probably sinking, in the long run, you're probably sinking more money into having these two incompatible systems.
Yes,
compared to integrating it all. So yeah, I mean, I can see that there was a wise move. Although, of course, you're now sort of in a position where you have to make all that money back because you've...
that's right. That's absolutely right.
But I thought about this the other day.
But that's also why I got the cameras that I did get, is because I'm also future-proofing with them as well. Sure. Plus, they both are the same mount, exactly the same mount. It's not the old Canon mount either. Yeah. So that's going to see me through. I can't see any real reason to upgrade from these in many years.
I mean, the reason why I still use the D750 is predominantly because the sensor is so good, and the glass is so good, and it works together really well, and I'm really used to it. And I haven't really, in what I do, I haven't really come up against any real limitations. Nothing that would be dramatic enough for me to think I can't shoot this job because I don't have the right tool.
I think from a video aspect, because that's developed so much over the past few years, there is big reasons for that. But from a stills perspective, the quality of image isn't changing.
No, really. Exactly. Yeah.
The convenience of functions that you have within that camera is what really kind of makes a difference.
Having had this conversation with Tommy last week, and talking about, for instance, he's changed to the Canon R5 recently from like a really ancient 5D Mark III, I think.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the eye focus, eye autofocus in the R5, and how that's really been sort of a total eye opener when he was shooting, the couple walking down the aisle.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was shooting weddings, I can absolutely see the advantage, because what that does is it gives you a higher yield of shots, and so therefore there's a real opportunity to create better work. Totally cool, because once that happens, you can then have a look at pricing and where you position yourself in the market and all the rest of it. It's really useful. For what I do, it doesn't really apply, because a lot of the stuff I do is basically studio based.
Yeah.
So there's no real advantage. Where the eye autofocus thing comes in handy, I think, is when you do volume headshot sessions, for example, where you're shooting like 100 people.
Totally. Yeah.
That is, you don't have to focus on hitting the eye and moving the thing. You just let it do its thing, and that actually takes hassle out of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that with that, but
it's what do you want to pay for that convenience, or that time save, whatever it might be, And
and the thing is, of course, you can't charge the client more.
No,
because all of a sudden you've got eye autofocus.
Yeah.
So that's always that's the thing.
Speaking of which, my R6 got a firmware update today.
Oh yeah.
Couple of interesting additions to it, which I've not really been keeping up on it with it, if I'm honest with you. But so it might have been announced for ages. But the two additions that caught my eye were vehicle tracking. So at the moment, it's got face eye detection. It's got animal detection, and now it's going to have vehicle tracking. Now that could be interesting.
It has torso tracking,
and it's got torso tracking. And what that means is that if you've got it, I'm going to guess if you've got it on eye face tracking, and it cannot pick out an eye or a face for some reason, maybe the head isn't in shot, it's in too much shadow, or there's hair completely covering, whatever it might be, but it can see that there's a body there, it will switch and focus on the body, which may or may not be a good thing, who knows, but it's an interesting addition. It's what they're thinking about adding is quite interesting.
But although you have to think like, okay, what's going to be next? So now they've got eye tracking, face tracking, animal tracking, torso tracking. So kneecap tracking next. I mean, what is the next thing?
Left earlobe tracking.
Yeah. Hey, I set it to right earlobe. It's not working. Oh, damn it. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows whether I'll even use it? I don't know.
I just love the fact that you can improve the performance of your equipment by doing a software update.
Yeah.
I mean, that in itself is
absolutely cool. Assuming the physical side of the camera is capable of it, there's no reason not to add this stuff.
Because the interesting thing then becomes like, okay, well, what if you applied this, let's say, to microphones?
Mm-hmm.
Can you change like electronically, if you have some software in there that can change the pattern, from one pattern to another pattern or something like that. You can just change it, like just upload another thing and it does another thing.
Well, that is interesting because it's a lot of it's physical things within a microphone that happens. However, there's a company called Lewitt. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone else does it. They do a mic where now anyone who does know about this stuff or has used this mic or seen it, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong because I'm just trying to remember, where you actually plug two XLRs into it, I believe.
Okay.
The XLRs come out, but what that enables you to do is to put their plug-in onto the channel after the fact and change the polarity afterwards to whatever you want.
Okay.
And, from Omni to cardioid to supercardioid and so on and so on and so on. Very interesting.
I was really impressed with when we went to the photography show and we spoke to our friends at Rode. And we were talking about the Rodecaster, which is basically a mixing desk, for lack of a better word, that's specifically designed for podcasting, which is super interesting. And what that did, this blew my mind. It's, one of the problems you have very often when you're using desks like that, let's say you've got, you have 4 speakers and you plug 4 mics in, but you don't have the same 4 mics, you have different mics. You plug them in, they all sound a little bit different. And that could be an issue, when you're trying to balance 4 voices off against each other.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about this thing is that it electronically matches the mics that you plug in to like different presets and makes them sound the same.
It's EQ matching. So if it knows the mic you're using and it's got it inbuilt, and you can say, I am using an SM7B, right? And you're using an NT1. Let's say someone else is using an NT1. Just in theory, I want to make the SM7B sound like the NT1. I don't know why you would want to do that, but that's what you want to do. And it's got the SM7 in there and the NT1. I want this to sound like the NT1.
Yeah, that's very cool, though. I mean, if you think about it, that's a really clever little thing to do. So, yeah, I find it very impressive.
You need to get yourself back in the audio world. I do all this stuff all the time.
Yeah, I know. I've been out of that for quite some time. Back in my day, we had dynamic mics.
Dynamic mics. What is this phantom power?
Yeah, I tell you what. Actually, talking about audio, just for a second, we talked about the Peter Jackson's Beatles documentary a little while ago.
La 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 la.
Get Back. Really interesting. If you have Disney Plus, check it out. It's called Get Back. It's fascinating. Yeah. One of the things that I found really remarkable was the fact that not only does it look amazing, I mean, it really looks like it was filmed yesterday, which is incredible. We talked about this before, but so Peter Jackson and his team developed brand new audio restoration technology to restore the audio. Because basically what they did was they were recording, candid conversations with a mic in a room. You can actually see it in the footage. It's on a boom arm, and they basically lower it sort of in the middle of them, and that records everything. The instruments, when they're playing, when they're talking. Sometimes they're talking over somebody else playing. I mean, it's a typical band rehearsal. Yeah. Somebody never shuts up. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Guitarists.
Exactly. Drummers. And so, all of that's going on, but what they managed to do is completely restore the audio in that so that you can hear everything with absolute clarity, all the conversations, and they sound like modern recordings.
I hope they release something that goes through all of that in a bit more detail. There'll be
behind the
something
scenes, there must be, yeah.
Because I'd love to see that, because there's a company called Isotope who kind of lead the way generally on audio restoration. And their stuff's very expensive, Yeah. For their main suite, it's probably £700 or £800. But it's worth it in general.
There's some audio restoration you're gonna have to do on the behind the scenes footage.
I don't have the £800 suite. I have the slightly cut down version.
£34.
No. It's a few £100, but it's slightly cut down. Yeah. You can go into it and be very surgical and go into real parts, but I generally just do an overall thing, because that's 99% of the stuff I only needs that.
Again, the thing that really fascinated me about this documentary is just how good it looks and how good it sounds. Even when they're playing through a song, it sounds really good. There's one mic in the room. It's incredible.
Yeah. I'd love
a shitty mic in the room, by the way. Like, we're talking about a 1969 mic in the room.
I don't know. Some of the best mics in the world ever created.
Arguably.
Perhaps not for television, but...
Okay, so here's something I want to know. Now, I've been watching the Beatles documentary and stuff, and actually, to be fair, my parents were big Beatles fans. And when I was a kid, I was like, that's my parents into that's old stuff, and I wasn't really, and I've really, throughout my musical career, I've never really paid much attention to the Beatles. Okay. And so when this documentary came out, I kind of sort of thought, oh, that's actually interesting. I don't really know that much about that period and what they actually did. And so I decided to look into that a little bit more. And so I listened to some of their albums in a little bit more detail, like Sgt. Pepper, for example, Rubber Soul. And of course, when you go onto Spotify, for example, you see a lot of remastered, and there's those different versions, like remastered in 2009 and the same thing remastered in 2018. And you listen to those.
They are different.
And I actually sometimes think they're not necessarily an improvement.
They're not an improvement. They are not. The original, they're not. So I don't like them.
So it's interesting, especially on Sgt. Pepper's Hot Club Band. That's a really good example where listen to the original. Yeah, you listen to the original, you kind of go, that's a really kicking tune. Yeah. And then I listened to some remastered version, I'm like, this doesn't sound anything like it. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah. The original mono and stereo versions are the best ones. Yeah. It's been a long time since I've heard the mono version of a lot of them, but I've heard the original stereo versions where drums are generally on one side. Yes. And that kind of stuff, like some of the old Hendrix stuff was a bit like that. But if you can try not to listen to those in the car or on headphones, because that is a bit disconcerting.
Extremely annoying in the car.
But if you can listen to it on an actual system and sit back away from the speakers and just take it in that way. that's how it's meant to be experienced.
I dislike those kind of stereo recorders in the car, because in the car, obviously, you're not centric. You're sitting in our country, you're sitting on the right. In your country, if you're listening to this, you might be sitting on the left, but
the wrong side, yeah.
The right side. And we're literally sitting on the right side.
Yeah.
Bizarre. Anyway.
But do you know why? I do know why. I know the history for this.
Isn't it because when people used to ride past each other and they were right-handed, they could draw their swords or something?
Almost.
Is that not right?
Almost. So we were back in medieval times when they used to do jousting. And they always held the joust in their right hand.
Yeah.
Which meant they needed to be on the left-hand side of the rail.
Yes.
So they could hit each other off the horse. And that's why we ended up, that's why driving started happening on the left-hand side of the road, right? Because
Brits still do a lot of jousting on the motorways.
Yep.
This happens every day. I see it. Oh, my God.
After the duel, yeah. but that's why we drive on this side of the road,
right.
The correct side of the road. And it was only because, I can't remember, I think it was America, or was it someone else? I forget now exactly, or maybe it was France, probably France. Who then said, you know what? Just because we don't really like you, we're driving on the other side of the road.
Right.
That's what happened.
Right.
I just can't remember which country that was.
Right. It would have been France, wouldn't it?
It sounds like it'd be France, wouldn't it?
It would have been France or Germany, maybe.
No, I don't think it was Germany. No. Anyway, there you go. Little nuggets of information for you there.
Lots of educational stuff on this podcast, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Now, what else are we going to talk about? Well,
anything in the next 2 minutes.
All right. Okay, so I saw some, again, I read something, and it just reminded me of a conversation I had with somebody the other day, actually. And it's all about, whether or not to add pricing to your website. And I thought it was quite, there's something I think people argue about, and there's, various points of view, opposing points of view. Some people say you shouldn't put your pricing on your website ever, and other people say, well, you should be totally transparent and put all your prices on there, on your website.
Yeah,
and of course there are pros and cons, for both. For both opinions, really. Ooh, well, my phone just started.
Hello, phone.
So, there are those who say, well, if you're putting your prices on your website, you're basically excluding, a whole range of potential clients because you're either too cheap or too expensive.
Why is that a bad thing?
Well, that's the question to be explored.
I don't think that's a bad thing because, there's a couple of things that could happen. It's you potentially alienate those potential clients because you're expensive to them.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with working with those clients is that a couple of things happen. You don't really want to work with them because they're paying you less. They will still expect the same kind of results though, but you're getting paid a lot less. There's just a disconnect between client and photographer in this instance. And they're just not your client. You're in a different pricing bracket. Now, on the flip side of that, when you have that conversation with that person, you may not be drastically outside their price range, and you might be able to come to some kind of a deal or compromise where you can still give them the same quality. You might be doing it slightly cheaper, but you drop something off. Or in the better way would be for them to come up to your price that you want to charge, but you throw in a couple of other things to sweeten the deal for them to make sure you to land that particular client.
I mean, it's ultimately always a negotiation to a degree.
Yeah. And then the same is kind of true of those those clients who want to pay more or would be willing to pay more, I should say. That's a slightly different situation. That's a little harder to overcome. But
there was an interesting example that I read about the other day, which sort of fits in here. Imagine this, right? Imagine there are two identical paintings on the wall, right? One was painted by a 17th century French master. It's absolutely priceless. It's like 300 years old. And the one next to it is a modern replica, which is basically totally identical, down to every brushstroke. Everything is 100% identical, but it was painted by an art student 3 years ago. They're totally identical in any way, shape, or form. Why do you think one is more valuable than the other?
Well, I guess it kind of comes down to the circumstance in which each painting was painted. Does that make sense?
It comes down to the story element.
Yeah.
The story of a painting that was painted by one of the great masters 300 years ago is a much more intriguing and interesting and valuable, therefore, story than the story of something that was painted 2 years ago by an art student.
Yeah. And ultimately, the original is the original. That painter came up with that painting. This one's just copied it.
Yeah, exactly.
Stroke for stroke.
Again, it doesn't make any difference to the actual painting because it's exactly identical, but it's the backstory that attaches value to it. And so, if you ask anybody, which painting would you rather take home? I think the vast majority of people will pick the old Dutch master type of a thing, painting. And so very often it's a story that's attached to something that actually gives you the sense of value. And, I think you can see that a lot in photography. I think when you get to a certain level, it's like you can't really say anymore, this guy's headshots are amazing because they're lit well. I mean, there's a point where lighting something well, understanding, lighting is just a given. I mean, that's just the baseline.
Mm-hmm.
We're all, like all of us here know how to light something. It's lighted well. That's not the defining factor anymore, Mm-hmm. So why does one person charge £1,000, another person charges 60 quid for something? There's a lot more to it than just the face value. And very often, of course, it's the experience. Like a good example is, I do get those calls actually quite regularly where people just want to come in, they want to do one headshot, and they want to be in and out in no time at all. And when they look at my prices, which is my price on my website, they sort of go, well, I don't want all that. I just want a quick headshot, which I need from a LinkedIn profile or whatever. Is it something you can do on the price? And typically I say no.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I had to do it about 3 calls or something on it recently. It's because that's not what I want to do. I want to invest the time to get a really good shot. And the one factor in that is time. It's not the lighting. I can light somebody well. I can come in for 5 minutes and I take one photo and it's lit well. That's not the issue. What I'm looking for is to get the expression, the relaxation, the look, all that kind of stuff. That only happens when somebody relaxes in front of the lens, and that's not going to happen in a minute and a half.
Yeah,
that's going to take more time. So that's a thing that is very different. But as a consequence, of course, my clients are different clients from the ones that want to spend very little on a headshot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a conscious decision, to move to that kind of business model, and so on. So that that's an argument for displaying your prices. On that, I mean, the other, I mean, again, there's pros and cons. If you don't have your price on your website, what can happen is that you get a lot of people who are comparing different photographers in different services, basically,
absolutely.
And if they don't see your price, I was going to move on to the next guy who has that price. And this guy's a little bit cheaper than that guy or whatever. And, they're going to go with that. That's fine. On the plus side, if you don't have your price on that, it may lead to somebody contacting you and asking, and then you have the chance to build up a conversation.
Absolutely.
And make that connection. But of course, that's an additional obstacle. And we all know that in the sales process, you want to eliminate as many obstacles as possible.
Quite.
So if you're requiring your potential client to be proactive and take that step, you're putting up a barrier between you and the client. That's one way of looking at it, of course.
Yep.
And again, on the plus side, if you have your prices on your website, then you're filtering out those who either can't afford your services or those who are looking for something maybe more boutique or whatever else, right? And so you're kind of automatically filtering out those people who are not necessarily your clients. So these are all like pros and cons. But they might dismiss you based on the figures that they see on the website, and you never actually get the chance to have that conversation in the first place. So I think it's a difficult balancing act, and I can understand how, especially new photographers, struggle with that quite a lot. Or maybe not only new photographers, but anyone at some point.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so there's this in between solution which I quite like, which is the starting from type of solution, where you're sort of just throwing out hints as to where your pricing may lie without actually giving definitive price points. You might, or the whole thing is like the range thing from till, and depending on what it is that you do. If you do family photography, for example, or you run a photo studio, you could say portrait sessions ranging from £99 to £300 or something like that. So you can give them a range, and then you cover a lot of bases, and you still have that. You have to have that conversation with a potential client, because you need to see where they are.
Yeah.
Are they the £99 client, or are they the £300 client? Whatever. And then you can sort of tailor things to where everybody's happy. They can afford this. You can give them that much for that, and so on and so forth. Maybe time, or number of shots, so whatever it may be. So that's very often a good solution for doing things. As always, doesn't apply to all forms of photography, and it really very much depends on what it is that you're doing. But it's a good way of thinking of it.
This isn't even necessarily photography related. This is any small business,
service related. Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
It's the same deal. I have to say I'm in two minds about it in general. I like the idea of starting from and giving a range. I like the idea of putting your full kind of price and cost on there. I like the idea of not putting your I like them all.
Yeah. I changed my...
You kind of want to try them out and see how business fluctuates.
I changed, we have mentioned this on the podcast before, but I have changed, about maybe a year ago or something. I changed the way I display prices on my website. I used to do what many people do. I used to have 3 packages, the stereotypical low-end package, the midway package, and then the expensive package. And of course, most people would sort of fall into the middle kind of package sort of thing. That's a very tried and tested pricing strategy. It works quite well. You position the middle package so it's closer to the more expensive package than it's to the cheapest one. But in principle, you're basically banking on most people going for the middle thing. That's cool. What I did on advice of a friend was that I changed my pricing structure, where I basically said, okay, I'm going to do a session fee plus cost per photo. And so what I did was, I went like, okay, this is my session fee. And then each photo, costs this much on top. And then, what then happens is that, first of all, there's a base price, which is actually higher than my middle package used to be. So I'm actually quids in automatically. But what happens during the session...
This is the way it's perceived by the client, right?
Well, and the thing is, like, why did I change it to an unlimited amount of time? So I'm not sort of saying, like... Because the thing with packages very often is you're like, okay, well, you have like a 20-minute session, I don't know, the hour session and a 2-hour session or whatever. You could differentiate your packages that way. And they come with other benefits and this and that. But... So I moved away from that, and what I do now is basically that I don't put a limit on the session length, and so therefore I can guarantee almost that the end result is going to be better, and the client's going to like it more, because with more time in front of the camera. And the other thing is you can run through different setups because you're not limiting yourself time-wise. You're not saying like, we're almost at the end of the hour and I won't be able to get the black background anymore.
The genius thing about this is that because it's unlimited time, let's just say it's 4 or 6 hours that you end up doing it, you get through those different background changes, costume changes, whatever they might be. They're going to want one of each of those, and probably.
That is exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens. So the upsell part of it,
what are you charging per photo in that kind of context?
In this context, £35.
That's a bargain.
Yeah, I mean, basically, and
I know an animal stroke, primarily dog photographer. I know of one. Do you want to know how much he's charging per photo?
What's it?
Technically, they look really good, but he has absolutely zero ability to get any kind of expression or something interesting happening with that dog in a studio setting as well. £800
Okay.
per photo.
Right. How many is he selling?
A lot.
Oh, right. Okay. Interesting.
Given the area that
I'm into dog photography from now. That's it.
See, that's the funny thing, isn't it? I know we're just going off on a bit of a tangent here, but people are willing to pay more for something to do with the pet that they love than they are for photos of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
There's that. I mean, in the sort of...
It's actually hard to do. It's hard to do.
I mean, in the headshot context, it's... what it allows you to do is, first of all, because you've got unlimited time, you can run through as many setups as you want. And you're quite right. Most clients will then, choose at least one shot from each.
Yeah.
Or very often choose one shot from each setup. And so you automatically, if you're running through 5 setups, that's 5 times, 35 quid, plus the session fee. So what happens at the end of the session is your bottom line is much stronger than had you said, this is the package, because by saying this is the package, you're limiting, you're putting an upper limit on how much you can possibly make from that session. You eradicate that limitation by saying, okay, well, we might be doing, maybe on this session, I'm only selling 1 photo, so it's, my session fee plus 1 photo. But then on another session, I sell the session fee plus 5 photos, and overall, you end up with, more income per session than you did if you put a limit on it,
and probably more income per session than what your top tier package used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So what I found is that for me, anyway, it's made headshots more lucrative than it was before.
Yeah,
and it was really just the realization that I was really self-limiting myself.
And what a simple change it was, really, right? You're practically not really doing anything else, different, other than your sessions are generally a bit longer.
There's 2 things. I mean, actually, I tell you what, and
is that true though? Are your sessions actually longer?
Yes, they are. I wouldn't say by much, because the thing is, when you sell a 1 hour session, and the client, things are going well, you might throw another 15 minutes into it. It doesn't matter. Because you want to be nice and you don't want to boot somebody out the door. Yeah. But, what does happen? I tell you what does happen, actually.
Don't do that out there. If you do that, give them an extra 15 minutes.
Unless you got people queuing up, of course.
Then don't book your sessions so close together.
But, I tell you what, it's one of the biggest differences that it has made by not limiting the time of the session. I am more relaxed because I'm not constantly glancing at my watch. Yeah. I'm not constantly
you
thinking.
Can take that extra 10 minutes to set whatever it is you're setting at that moment, making sure the lighting, you know what, that'll be fine before. That's good there. I know that's good there. It's going to work. Now you've got a little opportunity to go, well, what if I just tweak it just a little bit to take a few more test shots and see what happens?
And you're building up that relationship with the client. We talked about this before. I like to kind of go in with a long lens to start with, and then as you build up that relationship, you then end up changing focal length and you get in closer, and you're really kind of cementing that relationship between you and the client, and then as a result, you end up with happier clients. So the funny thing is, I'm a lot more relaxed when I'm shooting. I actually come out with more money per session. My clients are much happier. So it's a total all-round win-win situation.
So I'll just rephrase what Kay just said there. Charge your clients more, they will be happier.
Okay, so
and on that bombshell.
Well, actually, let me just clarify this with one thing. So you gotta detach yourself, I think. And this is the difficult part. And this is why it was difficult for me to take that step and change my pricing. Because I was mulling that over for a long time before I actually ended up being brave enough to actually go for it and change it. Because I thought, okay, what could happen is that all of a sudden people think I'm too expensive and they won't book me anymore. And that's a fear, and that very often prevents you from changing things because you think, but what if? So but what's actually happened is that I'm now, I guess, I mean, people look at the pricing, it seems to be more expensive, but my clientele has changed as well.
So my gut reaction and feeling towards you changing that in that way is that you have lost some clients, that you potential clients.
Sure.
No question, it must have happened. But you've replaced those with a whole different set of clients who I am willing to bet will become repeat customers.
So the thing is, like, imagine this, right? If you're, let's say for argument's sake, you charge £100. It's just for the simplicity of numbers, right? You charge £100 for something. In order to make £1,000, you have to find 10 clients.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you charge £500 for something, it seems like your pool of people who can afford the service is much smaller, but you really only have to find 2 clients.
Yeah.
Not 10.
Yeah, your pool of clients is potentially smaller.
Which is the thing. Like, I don't know if you're getting this here, but I remember, we used to have a little photo studio in the high street where I live, and it's no longer there, but it used to be there for years, I think. And we used to get these flyers through the door, like family shoot 40 quid, and I used to look at this and go like, 40 quid? Are you nuts? Like, how can anybody make a living on doing a shoot for 40 quid? So I'm thinking, well, first of all, that's probably going to last 10 minutes, Okay. But how many clients do you have to find to make that worth your while?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
it's one thing doing that for one day. It's one-off special day to get a whole
different
new
thing.
Hopefully a whole new set of clients for the future just from that one day. It's a loss leader, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one thing. But if that's what you do, and that's difficult.
And it was literally 40 quid. I'm thinking like, right, either
I'd be stressful. I'd be so stressed.
Well, it's so,
because that's the kind of price where I think a lot of people, particularly these days, and I know you're probably going back a little way as well, but these days I think most people go, that's too cheap, it's going to be rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's, you'll probably find, I mean, you find people, that will come through your door, but I'm thinking like, well, mainly I'm thinking like, how many of those do you have to find? I mean, it's just, that's nuts, the amount of people you actually need to make it worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's crazy. So anyway, pricing is always going to be difficult, I think. It's always going to be individual to a point.
I think so. But it's something that's worth putting a lot of thought into and trying things out to see what happens.
Definitely.
Hopefully you can learn quickly what it's doing so you can revert back or try a different way of doing it as well. You never know.
And you never know. I mean, you change your pricing structure. If you have a lot of people, running down your door, or beating down your door, then, there's a good argument to say like you need to raise your prices, right?
Absolutely.
You need to kind of adjust it to,
that's another good point.
To, demand basically. But nevertheless, it's different pricing strategies, I think. This is really what we're talking about. We're not really talking about the level of pricing per se.
No.
We're more talking about different ways to price.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's extremely useful information for somebody starting out.
Absolutely.
It's also just realizing that things are not cut and dry. You can always change things if you find they're not working.
Yeah.
As long as you're brave enough to take that step. And you can experiment. A little bit.
Totally agree.
So
awesome.
Again, on that bombshell, on that bombshell.
I don't want to know about your bombshell.
On that bombshell. That is pretty much it for today. We've come to the end of episode 85 of the Camera Shake podcast. Remember, if you want to have, first glances on our behind the scenes special, then make sure you head over to camerashakepodcast.com, hit the join the community button. Be super awesome to see you there. And we've got some super awesome goodies coming up.
We do. I was just thinking, I wonder if Tommy actually watched the YouTube version of his own video last week, or whether he still watched the audio version. Okay. So Tommy, if you're listening.
I will say one thing. Okay. And I listened to Tommy's podcast the other day, the Talk Pod, which I listened to it in the car. I genuinely listened to it on the motorway as I was driving, and it was.
You must have been bored.
No, I genuinely wanted to, because I saw it coming up. on social media, and I thought, I like listening to stuff like that. I listened to it. It's generally funny. There's a funny little sequence that might give you a clue about what there is in store for 2022. So I highly recommend head over to the Talk Pod as well. Give those guys a chance. Have a listen. You won't be disappointed. It is super fun. Some very, very, very useful information. Honestly, I've learned a couple of things because I'm not a wedding photographer, and it's really interesting to listen to to Tommy and Alex Bennion, who's also a former guest on the show. Talk about the way they do certain things and the problems that they have and the solutions that they find, especially in conjunction with Brexit. And so it was interesting. I generally have learned a couple of things of stuff that I wasn't aware of. So well worth checking out.
Go and subscribe to those guys as well. And we actually interview both Tommy and Alex together in our photography show episode.
Yes, correct.
So go recheck that out as well.
Right. So anyway, we have generally come to the end of this show. Remember, head over to camerashakepodcast.com. Hit the join our community button. We will absolutely love to see you there. With that being in mind, we shall see you again next week.
See you later.